Ladies and gentlemen, we have some breaking Matvei Michkov news. The top prospect for the Philadelphia Flyers could be coming over to Philly as soon as this offseason. Yeah, that's right. After all of the discussion in his draft year about Matvei Michkov having to stay in Russia until 2026, there is a good chance now that he could be coming over to Philly as soon as this next month. Today, we're going to be breaking down all the news, how likely Matvei Michkov is to actually sign with the Flyers this offseason, and what it means for Matvei Michkov's career and the Flyers going forward. So make sure you watch till the end for all of that, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey prospect content just like this all throughout the year. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a story that I've been waiting to talk about for a long time, but I honestly wasn't expecting to talk about it for a long time until 2026, until we eventually saw Matvei Michkov sign with Philly. But now it looks like there's the possibility it could come a whole lot earlier than expected. It was talked about a lot during draft year last season how Matvei Michkov was going to be under team control in the KHL for a long time, and the Flyers or whoever ended up drafting him wouldn't likely be able to see him until the 2026-27 NHL season. And it was a major concern for a lot of people, including some of you guys on the channel as well, wondering how long you have to wait for Michkov to actually come in the end, especially for some of you guys that were fans of teams at the top end of the draft. It was a concern in Michkov's case, even though he was uber talented. But for me personally, it was always a little bit of a silly discussion, especially in Michkov's case, because I think he wasn't an NHL ready guy like a Fantilli, a Bedard, a Carlsson. In Michkov's case, I would have absolutely loved to see him get at least another year in the KHL to get some more development and be the guy over in Russia. And when you look at most prospects, especially even guys drafted outside of the top 5, it's not all that unrealistic to expect 3 or 4 years to become true NHLers, to become mainstays in the lineup. And in Matvei Michkov's case, originally, that was going to be the plan. And also in Michkov's case, even if the original plan went underway where he was coming over in 2027, there was only 2 more years of KHL time, which I don't think is all too crazy, especially in the state that the Flyers are in. I don't think they necessarily needed Michkov immediately, nor did a lot of other rebuilding teams. If he comes over after 2 more seasons and he is this electric player right out of the box, especially if you're a rebuilding team, that might be the best thing because you can still keep rebuilding, still keep adding better pieces in the draft while Michkov is cooking and becoming a future NHL star. But when you look at Michkov, he's already doing incredible things in the KHL as a 19-year-old. In 47 games with Sochi, having 19 goals, 22 assists for 41 points. And sure, were there warts? Absolutely. There were times defensively where there was some inconsistent play, but matching the physical intensity of the KHL, becoming a dynamic offensive player, that's what Michkov was able to do. And in a lot of ways, bringing what he brought best in his game to a top role in the KHL level consistently throughout a full season, which was a big step. And that's not even talking about what he could have done with a couple more years of KHL time. He would have been probably the best player outside the NHL, no doubt. I mean, you just look at Kirill Kaprizov, who was an even more extreme case, came over at 23 years of age, but I don't think the Minnesota Wild are really regretting him keeping him over there. You can see what he's been able to do, becoming Minnesota's first real superstar in their franchise history, and I think they were okay keeping him for a couple more years. It worked out okay. But for how much it was a contentious topic, for how many people ended up dropping Michkov in their draft rankings, he might be coming over way sooner than anybody expected. And here we go, getting the news from Alexander Appleyard talking about this whole situation. He says, well, pretty notable news. SKA chairman Medvedev says the Flyers want Michkov in the NHL. SKA has good relations with the Flyers front office and won't violate his KHL contract. We'll talk, won't rule out letting Michkov go to the Flyers, and the decision will be no later than the end of June. Now we get a few more interesting notes, especially this part saying if he does leave, he would have to have a guarantee in contract return to SK if he does not make the NHL. So no AHL time or option there, which could play a part, but also considering the player that Michkov is, I don't think he should be in the AHL anyways. So if he does end up getting signed, I don't think that'll end up being a problem. But I think it is just so important that the Flyers and SK are having talks in this regard, discussions about this. And even though it isn't confirmed, it is a genuine possibility. And it is extremely important, I think, for the Flyers as well to have a good relationship here. As they talk about with the Flyers front office, they won't violate his KHL contract, and they will continue to talk with SK to potentially get a deal. That, to me, it just shows how Philly is prepared in this entire situation. Has been prepared to draft a player with the complications of Matvei Michkov, but they've come prepared in every single way. Already having the details locked in and making sure they establish that good connection. This, to me, this whole situation and how it's been handled by the Flyers has been world class. And if they're able to sign Michkov this offseason, it is a steal and a half how they did this entire process. Now, there are concerns, mainly John Tortorella, but I do think a player like Michkov in the system of Philadelphia could do quite a bit. I think there's this reputation that Michkov has for some reason of being this soft player, somebody that doesn't go to the dirty areas. But if you ever watch Michkov, this is a player that forechecks. He just gets in the dirty areas around the boards to create chances. He will do anything for an offensive play. And I think in Philly, that could be pretty appreciated. Again, with how dominant he was already as a KHL player this last year, I think another offseason of strength training and getting even more good with his skating. This is a player that I think could be NHL ready next year. The question of him being a Calder candidate, we have to wait and see. But I think Michkov could be an exemplary player, especially if he's put in the right position, sheltered a little bit, given some good power play time. He would immediately become Philly's most skilled player by far. Now, the thing for me too is I think a lot of this could depend on Philly's game plan for this offseason. Are they going to trade a player like Travis Konechny? Are they going to offload a bunch of guys on this roster? Are they going to open up cap space and opportunity for Matvei Michkov to come in on that right side and immediately get top 6 minutes? I mean, I think there's a potential there. You could still have a player like Bobby Brink push down the lineup, but I think you probably would have to trade bodies to make sure that Michkov gets a solidified spot and have open communication with John Tortorella that, yeah, you got to play this guy. But let's say they do trade Travis Konechny. I think that would be maybe the biggest domino effect towards signing Michkov in the end. If they're going to trade a player like that on the right wing who has been so established, so good for this Flyers team, I think it would immediately open up a incredible position for Michkov to come onto this Flyers roster and be the guy, which I'm sure Michkov would love to be. You also have the fact that Sean Couturier changed agents recently, going to Pat Brisson, and agent infamous with making sure that his clients get traded if they wanted to. There could be a lot of turnover with the Flyers this offseason. There was even talk of that, how John Tortorella at the end of the year was talking about how much he wanted to see this whole system changed and wanted to see the players that really want to be Flyers show up in a big way. And we really didn't see a lot of them show up in the second half, show up in those last few weeks of the season. And maybe there's a lot of roster turnover. We'll see how much Tortorella is actually directly involved with the whole process, but don't be surprised if the Flyers look a lot different next fall. Now, this Michkov news makes me especially sad that the Cutter Gauthier situation went the way it did, because imagine if Gauthier was coming in the NHL next year. Imagine if Michkov was coming into the NHL at the same time as Gauthier was. I mean, those two would be absolute rock stars on the same line if they went that way, and they absolutely could have. It would have been so much fun, man. Now, talking about if Michkov were to come into the NHL next year, what the expectations might be. I'd love to know down below if he does come over, how many points you see him getting next year, because I think at least immediately he'll be a very solid top 6 point producer. There will be, of course, those warts defensively, and I don't think those are going to end in his first year in the NHL as a teenager, but I think the way he reads the game offensively, the way he forechecks, battles along the boards, gets loose pucks, those type of things are going to translate pretty well immediately to the NHL level, and I don't think he's going to be a bad player whatsoever. I don't think he'll light the world on fire like a Connor Bedard did, and even though there will be some adjustments to be made, I do think Michkov would have a great rookie season. Could be in the Calder contention, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him getting top 3. But that also does depend a lot on what Philly does this offseason. If they trade Couturier, Konechny, get some better center depth perhaps, and bring in some good talents, then maybe they're able to surround Michkov in a better way, but we'll see what happens. There's a lot for Philly to worry about this offseason. I wouldn't be surprised if they just kick the can for Michkov maybe down the line. But this is the most interesting thing, is that it doesn't just have to happen this offseason. If they wanted to do the same thing, if they wanted to have discussions with SK next year and this next offseason, then they absolutely could and get Michkov a year ahead of plan. It's always a possibility, and in Michkov's case, I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen. That's what's so important in this whole process, is the fact that this connection between SK and Philly is there. It's established, and it's a great relationship, and that will aid to signing him eventually. That'll make sure that he doesn't go past his next contract. That'll make sure that Michkov stays in Philly for as long as possible, and that's the end goal here. We want to see Michkov in the NHL. We want to see him dominate, and having that that connection between the two parties is critical for that. Really, with this whole situation, there's no real way I think the Flyers or Michkov can lose. Even if they wait a couple of years, Michkov would be an established product and I think would be much more NHL ready and would immediately become a star for them. But if he comes over now, you'll have the control over him and his development. You'll be able to mold him the way you want and be able to get a great player out of him eventually. No matter how this happens, the Flyers and Michkov come out as winners, and you love to see it. But then you look at the 2023 NHL draft board and you see Michkov there at 7th overall, and everything about it looks like an absolute steal. And obviously there are the things to talk about with Michkov about how he wanted to meet with certain teams, and some teams might not have been in the running or have the opportunity to sign him in the end, and maybe some teams didn't have the options or the resources to be able to have a connection with SK or be able to sign him this early. But the fact that the Flyers were able to make this happen, it was perfect opportunity and perfect timing. And for the Flyers, they're going to reap the rewards of all this, getting a star player in the future, and Michkov is going to be that. Already, next year's rookie class is looking spectacular, but the fact that we could get Michkov already, the best prospect in the NHL right now that hasn't yet been drafted, is special, man. I am absolutely going to be excited. Going to be there day one watching for his NHL debut if it ends up happening, because it is going to be special. This is a special player we're talking about here in Matvei Michkov, and the fact that he'd be coming already over to North America would be incredible. And for the Flyers, it is going to be a transcendent talent, and really a talent offensively they haven't had in a long time. Better than a player like a Claude Giroux, better than really any player over the last couple of decades for them. It is going to be an incredible talent and somebody that will get butts in seats. That's for sure. The thing is, for me, I would still probably have him in the same place I ranked him back in 2023, 4th overall. I'm still confident that Fantilli, Leo Carlsson, Bedard will all be better overall players than Michkov will be. But I could absolutely see Michkov having a few 100-point seasons, being an offensive powerhouse, and eventually rounding up to be an okay defensive player. Nothing that's going to be absolutely special, but I could see him being molded in the correct position, especially if he's brought over early into the Flyer system. There's so much potential there, man. But really, the top end of the 2023 draft is looking special. With those top 4 guys, all 4 of them I see being franchise difference makers. And just looking back on that 2023 draft, it was definitely something special. But I'd love to know down below, if you could do the 2023 draft over, if you now know that Michkov is coming over, where would you draft him? Would you have him 2nd overall behind Bedard? Would you have him below Carlsson or Fantilli? I'd love to know your thoughts, because it could go any one direction. Of course, I had him 4th, but I could see any argument to have him as high as number 2. And let me know what you guys think about Matvei Michkov potentially coming over already. How do you see him performing in Philly if he were to join them immediately? Do you see him being a Calder candidate? Do you see him winning the Calder Trophy? I'd love to know all your thoughts down below, and love to know your thoughts on Michkov signing early. What do you think about it? Do you think it's the right decision for Michkov long term? Were you surprised by it as well? Because I know I was quite a bit this morning, seeing all the news about it. And I hope you, of course, enjoyed the video. Enjoy the breakdown and everything like it. If you did, hey, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and of course, share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online, especially the Flyers fans. Get the good news out to them, and click on this card for all of my 2023 draft content round 1 playlist if you guys want to binge the draft back then. And I will see you in the next one. Have a great hockey day, and goodbye.